Good morning, everyone. It is a lovely, gloomy Thursday morning. I thought I would pop on here a little bit early today to discuss our Psalms for today. So as you come in, let me know that you're here, say hello, share where you are logging in from, and I'm going to get started here in a moment. I hope everyone's psalm reading is going well. We're almost to the halfway point, which is awesome. I can't believe we've already done 44 days. It seems like we just started this yesterday. To those of you who haven't been able to keep up, for those of you who kind of dropped off, I ask you to please just hop back on again, even if you get a couple more Psalms read, or you jump back on and do the rest of it. It's still counted as an act of faith. So don't be ashamed by not reading all these Psalms. Don't be ashamed by falling off. This is a difficult time to, one, concentrate. It's a difficult time to pick up a kind of a new habit because there is so much chaos and uncertainty around. So I certainly do not look down upon anyone falling off, anyone who's not able to keep up, because such is life. What I do recommend, though, is that you find some time to get into the Word, even if it's not the Psalms. I get it. The Psalms aren't for a lot of people. They can be repetitive. They can be depressing. Some of them are kind of hard to get through. It seems like some of them may not be applicable. So I understand that oftentimes it's hard to get through this entire book. And I think that's oftentimes why we only take out one piece of it, because it can be different. Once you start seeing it as poetry, and once you start diving into it like we're doing, and see the personal application, it's easier to read then. So I just encourage you to continue pushing forward, to continue reading. Like I said, if it can't be the Psalms, then let it be something else. Just get into the Word of God, especially during this time. There's, this situation that we're all in has happened before many times. And there are biblical applications throughout the entire Bible that we can look into just to encourage ourselves and understand where God is coming from, and so on and so forth. So that was a long talk about a whole lot of nothing. But if you have fallen off, come on and hop back on for the second half, which we are almost in. So I'm going to get started. Today we have two Psalms, Psalms 83 and 84. I'm going to go into them a little bit. This is not going to be a very long discussion, but if you come on here and you have a question about any of the text, or you want to discuss something, let me know. Even if you're watching the replay, you can comment, or you can message me directly if you want to talk something out here that you need clarity on. So let's start with Psalm 83, and I'm reading from NIV. O God, do not remain silent. Do not turn a deaf ear. Do not stand aloof, O God. See how your enemies growl, how your foes rear their heads. With cunning they conspire against your people. They plot against those you cherish. Come, they say, let us destroy them as a nation, so that Israel's name is remembered no more. With one mind they plot together. They form an alliance against you. The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, of Moab and the Hagrites, by Byblos, Ammon, and Amalek, Philistia and the people of Tyre. Even Assyria has joined them to reinforce Lot's descendants. Do to them as you did to Midian, as you did to Sisera and Jabin at the river Kishon, who perished at Endor and became like dung on the ground. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, all their princes like Zeba and Zalmunna, who said, let us take possession of the pasture lands of God. Make them like tumbleweed, my God, like chaff before the wind. As fire consumes the forest, or a flame sets the mountains ablaze, So pursue them with your tempest and terrify them with your storm. Cover their faces with shame, Lord, so that they will seek your name. May they ever be ashamed and dismayed. May they perish in disgrace. Let them know that you, whose name is the Lord, that you alone are the Most High over all the earth. All right. I hope my video didn't cut out. I just got a call in. But I read Psalm 83 from the NIV. So in this psalm, the author is not praying against an attack on themselves, and they aren't praying against even an attack on their enemy, or for an attack on their enemies. What they are praying for here is that God address his enemies, that God do something about his enemies, not the Israelites' enemies, but his enemies. And it's important to note this distinction because it gives the language, which is pretty dark here. It gives the language some, it gives it, what's the word I'm looking for? It gives the language some basis. I'll just say that. And so when they frame things as God's enemies, what they were looking for out of it was that these people were evil. And therefore God must do something about evil. So while we may look at it and say, how could these people pray something so so bad about their enemies? How could these people tell God to kill their enemies? They didn't view it the way we view it. They didn't have the Jesus example to pray. So because they were God's chosen people, anyone who was an enemy of theirs was an enemy of God. And thus, God must do something about his chosen people's enemies. So while it doesn't excuse their language, it does give context to why they were saying this. And I'll go a little bit more into this for my revelation. So we get here kind of a list of their enemies and a list of times when God helped them. And this actually tells us that there's personal history going on, okay? So first we have Edom. The Edomites were descendants of Esau, okay? The Ishmaelites are descendants of Ishmael, right? Abraham and Hagar had Ishmael. In Moab, the Moabites were descendants of Lot, as well as the Ammonites were descendants of Lot. And then the Amalekites were descendants of Esau. So we see here that there is this deep-seated issue going on, that there's history here between families. And so this psalm highlights family histories and how the issues can be passed on generation through generation, right? So that before you know it, cousins and siblings and, grandparents and grandchildren are all caught up in this dispute because of something that happened years ago. In this case, it was centuries ago, right? Before you know it, you are in the middle of a battle with what is actually family because of something that happened a long, long time ago. And we see it in our families today. And do you have someone in your family that doesn't talk to another family member? And you're like, what happened? Why don't y'all talk? And a lot of times they don't have an answer. It's something deep-seated that happened so long ago, but it's almost been passed down. Like if you have cousins who don't speak to each other, that might have stemmed from something that happened with the grandparents and the children, or so on and so forth. So here it gets to the point where they're literally battling each other. But this also goes to show that we place generational curses upon our bloodline. So we should resolve whatever is happening. I know there's a lot in the discussions about Lot and Esau and so on and so forth, but this is a good example of it. Moving on in verses 9 through 12, the psalmist is standing then on God's history, God's saving the Israelites in these desperate situations. So we have Gideon defeating the Midianites. This is what it's referencing when they talk about Oreb, Zeb, Zeba, and Zalmunna. And then we have Sisera and Jabin, who were defeated by Deborah, Jael, and Barak. So what they're doing is saying, God, you did this before. You defeated, in these cases, it was like a massacre of their enemies. So do it now. Do the exact same thing in the situation that we are doing. And we see this throughout the Psalms, that they don't necessarily have something to stand on looking to the future. But if they look to the past, they can stand on that to get through whatever they're facing. So for my revelation here, I want to talk about, how as Christians, how as believers, do we respond to this prayer? What do we do with this prayer? Like I talked about, we should have this negative look at this prayer. To us, it should appear wrong because this goes directly against what Jesus teaches us to do, right? He tells us to pray for our enemies, to love our enemies. But again, they didn't have the context of Jesus Christ. They didn't have the teacher of Jesus Christ. So what they were praying is pretty valid here. But, here the author is praying that God puts so much pressure on the enemy. He's praying that God put their backs up against the wall so that they don't have any choice but to turn to him. Okay? It's a by any means necessary prayer. You or I may have been in a by any necessary means prayer position, where perhaps it's a family member or a friend who is not a believer, who has fallen back, who has, sometimes when we deal with addicts, we have to pray a by any means necessary prayer that God, if they have to go to jail, if they have to hit rock bottom to finally come to you and see you, do just that. All right, so we can look at it in that context. And in one of the authors that I often refer to, Derek Kidner, he speaks to it as the minimal way to turn someone to God, right? At the very least, God, do something to them. If it has to be bad, do something that will turn them back to you. It's not our ideal prayer, but it gets the job done. Oftentimes we have to use these types of prayers when we're praying for someone who has hurt us or for someone who is kind of living this reckless life. We see in verse 18, it says, let them know that you, whose name is Lord, that you alone are the most high over all the earth. So this is a prayer of God. You're going to have to show them that you are a judge. You're going to have to show them that you are sovereign. You're going to have to show them who you really are to get them to turn to you. So how do we use this type of prayer? I would say we don't, but we can, and I'm going to read this quote. Another author that I refer to a lot is James Limburg, his commentary on the Psalms. And he says, those who remember Jesus' advice, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, will be uneasy with this language about death, dung, and whirling dust. They will not be able to pray for the dismay and the disgrace of their enemies. But even the strongest of believers may understand the sense that God is absent or at best inactive that informs this psalm. At such a time, the only prayer possible may be, O God, do not keep silent, do not hold your peace or be still. So what he's saying here is that sometimes we are in such a bad place, sometimes things look so grim that all we want is for God to do something. We don't care what it is, we just need a reminder that God is still there and that God is still active. And it's during those times that our cry represents more that we want to see God than it does that we want him to do a specific thing. It's that place of desperation where you're just like, God, I can't, just do something so that I know you're here. And so from that perspective, if we're able to look at this psalm through empathy, through being in that dark place, through praying a very desperate prayer And it may not sound right. It may not, you may be like, I can't believe I just prayed that, but you did at the very least pray. You did at the very least ask God to do something, and that is still counted as faith. That is still counted as a prayer. So it's something that we have all experienced. It's just that we may not have put it into these words. I hope we didn't put it into these words, but they are coming from that place, and that's how we can connect with it. All right. So the next psalm is a little bit more lighthearted. In fact, it's more of a psalm of praise. So I'm going to go into Psalm 84, and I'm going to read from the Good News translation. How I love your temple, Lord Almighty. How I want to be there. I long to be in the Lord's temple. With my whole being, I sing for joy to the living God. Even the sparrows have built a nest, and the swallows have their home. They keep their young near your altars, Lord Almighty, my King and my God. How happy are those who live in your temple, always singing praise to you. How happy are those whose strength comes from you, who are eager to make the pilgrimage to Mount Zion. As they pass through the dry valley of Baca, it becomes a place of springs. The autumn rain fills it with pools. They grow stronger as they go. They will see the God of gods on Zion. Hear my prayer, Lord Almighty. Listen, O God of Jacob. Bless our King, O God, the King you have chosen. One day spent in your temple is better than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather stand at the gate of the house of my God than live in the homes of the wicked. The Lord is our protector and glorious King, blessing us with kindness and honor. He does not refuse any good things to those who do what is right. Lord Almighty, how happy are those who trust in you. Beautiful psalm. We've all heard bits and pieces of this, and this psalm is simply about God's dwelling place. It reads as though the author has been away and is longing to get back to the temple. It was obviously a place very special to him. He had a connection to it. He may have lived in Jerusalem at one point and had to go away for whatever reason. So it not only talks about the temple, but it references a pilgrimage to the temple, as well of the blessings of the Lord upon those who worship there. All right. And we get a picture of its beauty, that the birds will build their nests within the temple walls. And we know, looking at pictures of how the temple was built, that it was a courtyard. And so, we hear about the trees that grew in the middle of the courtyard, and then these birds obviously feel safe and secure there, just like a person would feel safe and secure in the temple. And we also then see, in reference to this pilgrimage, how one would be sustained by God. Walking through this dry place, though the waters would fall like a spring rain, and there would be no lack on your way to visit the temple. So my revelation for this is probably pretty obvious. It's that, of course, we can take this out of the context of time. We can take it out of the context of the temple in Jerusalem and just use it to refer to God's presence. So, we see overall that there is this longing to be in the presence of God. We read it as a longing to be in the temple, a physical place. But really what it's saying is a longing to be in the presence of God. And the author also associates then happiness with being with God. Now, in the Hebrew, you might see a different, or in different translations, you might see a different word. A lot of them use blessed instead of happiness. But if you go back to the Hebrew, it means just about the same. So we can go with happiness. In verse 4, it says, happy are those who live in your temple, always singing praise to you. So we see that happiness is connected to those who are in constant communion with God, for those who worship consistently, those who have a lifestyle of worship. And then in verse 5, it says, how happy are those whose strength comes from you, who are eager to make the pilgrimage to Mount Zion. And so it's saying that if we rely upon God rather than ourselves in this journey, the journey called life, then we will be happy. And also, if we press our way to God, if we take the initiative to have to crawl through a desert, to have to push through and getting there, then we will be happy. We will be rewarded. We will be blessed for our push. And then finally in verse 16, we see that happiness is directly correlated to trust. If we trust in God, then we will be happy. The higher the trust, the higher the happiness. So what we see here is that we find happiness, we find everlasting joy, we find that unspeakable peace only in the presence of God, only in our press, only in our consistent worship with Him. And so there is a reward to coming to God and dwelling in His presence. So this entire psalm is about the faithful person who is chasing after God. And this person will know the power. Like I said, this person will know the unspeakable joy. And this person knows what it means to get in the presence of God. They know how powerful it is, how life-changing it is. So this is our call to get in communion with God, to get in His presence and make sure we are doing consistently. Make sure we have a press in us that we won't let little things get in our way. We won't let a little dry place get in our way. Sometimes we may not feel like worshiping, but we have to press through that dry place to get into the presence of God, because that is where we will be lifted. That is where we will be renewed. And it even says here that in our press, God will sustain us through the press. But we have to take the initiative first to start climbing, to start walking to God. And then He will give us the strength to continue pushing until we get to Him. So my charge for you today is to get in His presence today. If it has to be for a minute, if it has to be for 5 minutes, if it has to be for 10 minutes, get in His presence. Do it through the Word, do it through worship, do it through prayer, however you need to, and let God fill you up with joy. Today, if you're in the Chicago area, it is dark, it is rainy, it makes you want to stay in bed all day. But get in His presence. He'll lift you a little bit. Give him some of your time for Him to fill you up, for Him to speak to you and encourage you. And that is where we will find happiness. That is where we will find peace. And that is where we will have these life-changing moments. So that is my encouragement for you today. I also just encourage you to read back through these Psalms. Read them a couple of times. They aren't long. Get your own revelations out of them. Read through. There's probably a verse or two that strikes you. It doesn't have to make sense to you right now. God will give you the revelation on it, but make sure you are just giving these Psalms a chance to sink in and to minister to you. All right, guys, like I said, if you have any comments or questions, if you're watching the replay, you can comment or directly message me. And let's keep going through these Psalms. Like I said, tomorrow marks our halfway point. So we are almost there. I'm excited. And I will be back tomorrow with another video post. If you are new to the group, every day when I post the Bible verse or the scriptures, the Psalms, in the comments, I will post my video from YouTube. And that is optional. It gives you a chance to maybe go a little bit deeper. I talk about the Hebrew, I talk about some background, some historical context, and I also share my revelations there. So it's all available to you. Again, stay encouraged, stay lifted, stay in your word, and we're just doing this thing together. All right, I love you all, and I will talk to you later. Bye.